Hey, everybody. I'm Leonard Jacobs, Interim Executive Director of the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning. I'd like to welcome you to Building Equity Through Art, Pulling from the Past to Shape Our Future. This is the culminating event of the first year of JCAL's Building Equity for Immigrant, Indigenous, and Native American Artists program. It's a pilot project funded through New York Community Trust. And we would first like to thank the Trust for its very generous support of this program. It is a 2-year program, so it will continue. In addition, I'd like to thank the Core Council. This is a group of 9 artists and arts administrators who have conceived, developed, and produced all 9 events that you're going to see during this festival. And most remarkably, they have done it in the midst of COVID. And they've done an amazing job. And on behalf of all of us, staff and board at JCAL, we really want to thank every member of the Core Council for their work and their perseverance. Last little bit of business, you may have noticed that JCAL is running a fundraiser. If you look just below, you can see a link. This fundraiser is to raise funds for our Black History Month programming coming up in February. Our interim artistic director, Courtney French, has programmed February with 7 events, I believe. If you click on the link, you can read more about them. We are more than halfway toward our goal. 100% of your donations go to the artists that are involved in these programs, not for admin. And we'd ask for your support. If you have any questions about anything, please always feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm at leonard@jcal.org. And now I'd like to pass it off to our interim artistic director, the visionary Mr. Courtney French.
I'm Courtney French, Interim Artistic Director for the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning. Welcome. Welcome to our presentation. We would like to thank you and your family for joining us today. Enjoy the program.
Oh, kama, watukan semi, ariko, ariko, semi achiano. Ariko, ariko, semi achiano. Ariko, ariko, semi koromo. Ariko, ariko, semi koromo. Ariko, ariko, teni rakuno. Ariko, ariko, teni rakuno. Ariko, ariko, teni sobaiko. Ariko, ariko, teni sobaiko. Bomatum watukan temi. Bomatum watukan temi.
All right. Taigwe ituno kena atia ono. Diri mukaro aguebana. Kasike yukayeke wainia kena Borikén Taino daka. Greetings, sisters and brothers. Thank you so much for your patience. Welcome to our event. We're still here, Caribbean Indigenous Peoples. This is a part of the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning Building Equity Project. My name, as I just introduced myself in my Taino language, my indigenous Taino language, in my community, I'm known as Múkaro Aguebana. People also know me as Roberto Borrero. My family lineage comes from the island of Borikén, which people know today as Puerto RIco. And I'm also a community leader, cacique of the Guayana Taino tribe. And it's an honor for me to be here with all of you today. It's an honor for me to be part of this culminating festival for this project. I got to work with some amazing artists and visionaries, cultural bearers throughout the year. And this set of programs that we're featuring over the last 4 days, this is the final day of the programming. We have another program coming up next, Kwanzaa Celebration, a little bit later this evening. We hope you tune into that. But it's just been an amazing time with these cultural bearers, visionaries, to bring out little aspects of cultures that peoples that reside in Southeast Queens and in New York and around the United States and the Caribbean islands and the diaspora. We're talking about immigrants, Native American, Indigenous peoples. And so it's really been a really excellent opportunity to collaborate with everyone. But right now I want to introduce some of the speakers that'll be joining me today in this program. I have the honor to call them friends and family. Been working with them for many years on many different projects. The first one that I want to introduce and bring on with me is Tai Pelli. There she is.
It's
Tai
a pleasure
is
to be here.
international. Yeah, thank you. Tai is an international relations and human rights officer with the United Confederation of Taino People. She's also a co-founder of the Caribbean Amerindian Development Organization. She's a writer, a speaker, a human rights advocate. She's just recently been doing a radio show, Voces Ancestrales. So she has a lot. There's a lot to speak about each of these presenters, but I want to bring on the other folks to get them on here as well. Next, I want to introduce my brother, my atiao, Damon Corrie, Chief Damon Corrie. Damon Corrie is there. Also go back a long ways. He is the hereditary leader of the Eagle Clan Arawaks of Barbados and Guyana. Also a human rights advocate. We worked together many years, like Tai and myself, at the United Nations level, advocating for the rights of indigenous peoples around the world. His family lineage is Lokono Arawak, part of our ancestral tree. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But very happy to have him on the show with us. How you doing today, Damon?
Good, brother, sister.
All right, great. And last but certainly not least is Irvince Auguiste. Are you there, Irvince? All right, I see you. Can you hear me? Oh, we have Irvince on mute, but I see him motioning that he can see us. But Irvince is a former chief of the Kalinago Nation. All right, good. I can hear you now. Irvince is a former chief of the Kalinago Nation on the island of Dominica, Waitukabuli. Damon is calling in, so he's calling in from Dominica. Irvince, Damon is calling in from Barbados. And Tai, you're calling in from Florida, I believe, correct?
Yes.
All right, and soon to be on making some other travels as well, but I'm glad I could be here. Just before we get into some of the questions, I want to just thank the Kasibahagua Taíno Cultural Society for opening us up with that 4 directions chant. Again, to start us off in a good way in connecting with our ancestors in our ancestral language. That was filmed right here in New York, in the Bronx, and in the South Bronx, where we have a large Taino community residing in New York and in the South Bronx. And so very happy that they could come out, they could do that for us, that opening. And so we're very blessed and honored to have that. So we're going to talk a little bit today about Caribbean indigenous peoples. Why? Well, you know, there's many Caribbean indigenous peoples in the diaspora in the U.S. and around the world. And, you know, we just got done recently with Native American Heritage Month in the U.S. October, people focus on the arrival of Cristobal Colon or Columbus to the Western Hemisphere. But you often hear about these European colonizers, these settlers coming in, but you don't often hear about who they contacted first. The very first people in the hemisphere who were identified as Indians, right? Whether it's the Native Americans, Indians, indigenous peoples, whatever the terminology is, the very first people who were contacted in this hemisphere, indigenous peoples, were the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean islands. First with the Taino, and then as we go down the island chain with the other Arawakan and other peoples living in the island chain. So we wanted to kind of give an update about what's happening in the communities, let people know that we are still here, whether we are on the islands or in the diaspora. We are still here trying to maintain our culture, trying to speak out and advocate for our communities. So maybe you just will go around, and how about if I can start with Irvince on this one? Irvince, uh, can you tell us a little bit about the community that you live in and where exactly your nation is located?
Okay, thank you, Roberto, and good afternoon to everybody who's listening and giving us this time. Special greetings to Brother Damon and to Sister Tai. The Dominica, to begin with, Dominica must not be confused with the Dominican Republic. So we usually refer to Dominica, the island, as the French language because it is located between the two French islands of Guadeloupe to the north and Martinique to the south. On the island itself, we are located on the northeastern side, and our territory, as it is most commonly referred to now, is approximately 8 kilometers squared. And out of this 8 kilometers squared territory, we have 8 villages. So our community is spread out over 8 villages, and our population is approximately 3,500 people. We have chief that is elected into office every 5 years on council. And we also have a representative in the House of Parliament who represents our constituency, which is made up of a smaller non-indigenous community. Fortunately for us, over the last 20 years, our representative automatically is a minister, and he sits in the cabinet of the island state. So we have a strong political voice.
Thank you very much, Irvince, for that. Tai, can you talk a little bit about the Taino Nation? You could talk about your particular community if you like, but also maybe expand a little bit about the Taino Nation so that people are familiar with what we talk about when we're saying Taino.
Exactly. Thank you, my dear brothers. It's such a pleasure to be with my dearest brothers on this afternoon. Thank you for inviting us, Múkaro. And as far as the Taino peoples, as Múkaro indicated, we were the first indigenous peoples to have been impacted by the European invasion on this side of the world. And as we have all sadly learned, particularly in the Caribbean, the mentality of erasure of indigenous peoples came very early on, and that is being fostered through today. That's why a lot of people will see that Taino usually makes a statement such as, Taino, yes, we're still here. One of the things that detractors of the Taino people, which include the entire Greater Antilles, the northern Lesser Antilles, and the south of Florida, up until the knowledge that we have today, because there's already theories that our people were in other territories and other states of the United States as well. But for now, we talk about the south of Florida as that part of the continental USA that our peoples were already inhabiting. But one of the things that has been perpetuated, particularly with peoples of the Caribbean, is the myth of extinction. And for a moment, we thought we were the only ones that were having to endure that. But as, for example, in my experience, the more I connected with other indigenous peoples and the global indigenous peoples movement, I saw that was a strategy that the states, meaning the governments, were using to advance their economic and political and pretty much the land grabbing and plundering of our lands. A lot of people think that the Taino realized they were Taino, along with the American Indian movements in the 1970s. And what I want to clarify is that the American Indian movement was not the only indigenous movement to have like really woken up around that time. It was almost like a global phenomena where people that had been told they did not exist for the longest time were saying enough. We need to organize and we need to move forward and we need to stress that we are here and we have always been here. And that's exactly what happened with the Patasho people. There's people in Bangladesh and other parts of the country that you would not even believe that their governments are stating that there's no indigenous peoples. So we are not excluded. We are not the exception as far as indigenous peoples being told they do not exist. Our elders were not believed. Even though we continue with our customs and practices, but that was our way of life. It was not like we have to be stressing every single day. The tea that I'm giving you is called traditional medicine, right? Or the way that we're planting, well, this is traditional agriculture. Our people did not have to do that, but we have always known exactly who we are and who we come from. And for the longest times, our elders were saying, your ancestors live within you. I know my grandfather used to say that to me when I was concerned about him, being so old and he was going to die. And he was like, but I'm here, I will always be here just like the others. And in the present, we have now affirmations from the science community saying, oh, as a matter of fact, the Taino are here. They've always been here because they have done it through DNA, something that our elders already knew spiritually. So I think that it is important that our people understand the dynamics of our erasure from the books. And you still find pages on the internet, right? But we have been here. We will continue to be here. We have future generations developing. And now we understand our rights, and we're going to continue doing that and defending them so that nobody has to apologize for being indigenous.
Hahom, Tai, hahom. Damon, let's go to you. Eagle Clan Arawaks. We're talking about Barbados, and can you tell us a little bit more, maybe just a little bit about the history of the Eagle Clan, Barbados, Guyana? Can you talk about that, and maybe about how many people are we talking about when we talk about the Eagle Clan and the Lakono in general?
Yes, brother. Okay, the Lokono tribal nation is about 10,000 persons. The vast majority are in Guyana, South America. The second biggest population is in Suriname, which used to be Dutch Guyana. The third biggest population would be Cayenne, which is also known as French Guyana, with the fourth population, which is the smallest, in far eastern Venezuela. But in terms of, there are many different clans. Suriname has preserved the knowledge of the clan distinctions best of all. I'm not so sure about in Cayenne. It's possible they too may be doing a better job of preserving the clan identity. But Guyana, although it's the largest population and the only place where we actually have demarcated autonomous territories, the clan recognition, the clan identity is not as strong. I know that I am the hereditary chief of my clan, the Eagle Clan, but honestly, I have not met anyone else in Guyana who could tell me what clan they belong to or their ancestors belong to. That is the lingering effect of colonialism, and the evangelization, where they sort of beat that identity out of you. You're literally beaten in school for speaking your language, and anything to do with your spirituality or your native cosmovision was considered heathen and savage. And so, don't even talk about it. Don't try to practice it. Forget all of that. And it got, I guess, to the point where it's like, North America was in the 50s, where they really needed a revival to get them back on things, traditional focus, because it lost so much through assimilation. But as terms of the Eagle Clan, we about half of the people on Pakuri territory, where my wife is from in Guyana, which is a 240 square mile autonomous indigenous territory, with 1,700 persons as a population. Now, that of that 1,700, only 1% are non-indigenous people. 17 people in that community who are not indigenous. The other rest, 99%, are Lokono Arawak people, and half of those are descended from the three Simon brothers. When they were Christianized, they were given the surname Simon. Everybody knows the famous artist George Simon. We know him as Uncle George, because my wife, her Christianized maiden name was Simon, so she's part of that family too. But he's the one that did the research and found that the three brothers who helped found the settlement of Pakuri in the 1800s, I think they were the fourth family to join there and start it off. Their father was actually the Semichichi, the holy man to my great-grandfather, who was the hereditary chief of that chiefdom on the upper Demerara River. So when the smallpox and measles epidemics hit the chiefdom and more than 80% of the population died, the only surviving child of my great-grandfather was a daughter, and never before had they passed on the hereditary leadership to a female. It's not father to son, it is always father to nephew, father to brother, like that, but through the matrilineal line. So you trace your ancestry to the mother, although women were not given the title of hereditary chiefs. But anyway, so great granny was the last surviving child, and great granddad had told her that he couldn't pass his authority on to her, but if any of her sons or her grandsons or any male from her progeny married back into the tribe, that they would inherit his authority. And so I didn't know that when I was little, but when I did marry back in the tribe in 1992, then I sort of fulfilled his criteria for that. So whereas in Guyana, like in Dominica, they have elected chief system that the British installed every 3 years, as opposed to 5 in Dominica. I have seen since 1992, I think about 8 or 9 elected chiefs come and go. 3 of those I represented them at the UN and OAS. You remember our work together in the OAS for 16 years. So I represented elected chiefs. So we have that working relationship, whereas they represent the colonial system that was imposed, and I more represent the traditional system that was pre-existing. But we are one people, and we have to work together, and not have animosity and tension between us. So of those 9 chiefs, I think only one was hostile, but it's more of a personality issue with that fellow. But anyway, the others, we have a good working relationship. When I want to revive some traditional practice or hold some traditional event, out of courtesy, I will inform the elected chiefs that I'm doing X, Y, or Z and invite them to participate. But I don't technically have to ask them for permission to do something which I know it's a traditional mandate for me to do. So you see what I mean? We work together, we collaborate as much as possible. But in 1925, my grandmother's mother, she was the last surviving child I mentioned of the chief, our last hereditary chief. She and her husband emigrated out of Guyana to Barbados into exile. And so right now there's my grandmother, which is one of her daughters, and my grandmother's 2 sisters who stayed in Barbados and married local men. One of them was Soro, and then there was a Keith Chandler, and our granddad Corbin. Of those 3 sisters that stayed here, there are 100 of us here in Barbados who are descended from the last child of our last hereditary chief. And one brother went to Cuba, and there are 80 of us in Cuba descended from him alone. And another brother, David, went to England, and there are a little over 100 of us in the UK descended from him alone. Then between USA and Canada, there's roughly about 20 other cousins. So in all, the Eagle Clan, Arawak hereditary leadership diaspora is about 300 persons. But on the territories in Guyana, still living traditionally, and so it's about 850 to 900 people, roughly half the population of Pakuri.
Thank you, Damon. Thank you for that. A fascinating history, but also very important, because you don't have this opportunity to learn about our peoples. We're not really taught This is not really taught in schools. Just recently, people are starting to come to grips to who Taino and other Arawakan peoples are. There was a comment that came in the chat just to let folks know. They said, what's the difference between Taino and Arawak? When we talk about Arawak, it's a large cultural and language grouping, right? It's a large grouping of peoples. And there are many different tribes and nations that make up that term Arawak. There's really not, at least as far as I know, and any of you can come in on this, but there's not a particular tribe per se called Arawak. Other peoples have called us that, but for example, the Lokono have their own name, the Kalinago have their own name, Taino have their own names, right? Besides our self-identification of Taino. But we're all part of this linguistic and cultural group that has a relationship. Now with the Kalinago, it's you have some other ancestry as well besides Arawakan, but as Tainos, we also have other ancestry coming from the Mesoamerican peoples that were in the islands in the early period. Arawakans came in, there was a mixing, but overall, largely we're connected in language and culture, mostly to the Arawak nation. So I want to go to Irvince now. Irvince, right now everybody's talking about the pandemic. It's like on the front of everyone's mind, and there's so many things that's happened in the Caribbean in recent times, and I can go to Tai after this on this as well. But we've had hurricanes, there's been other things, but now we're hit with COVID. How is the Kalinago nation faring under the current COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, fortunately for us, island-wide, we have not had so many cases. Presently, I think we're only 8 cases now. And for us in the Kalinago Nation, we have very much followed the protocols established. And we only had 2 cases and observations sometime earlier in the year. As it is now, we have no cases at all on our territory. And we have just pretty much followed all the protocol. The island itself, as it is now, is operating very normal. Everything is going fine. We use our mask as often as required. We follow the protocols of keeping the hands washed properly, not having heavy congregation, not having any parties where we are all in any big form. So for us, it has been good so far.
Thank you for that, Irvince. It's good to hear. Good to hear that these things are going on, especially with a small community. Again, can you just remind us about how many people are on the Kalinago territory?
The territory as it is now is approximately 3,500 people. But out of that population, we have persons who would be out of the territory from time to time, because persons are either working in the city or they are working in some other communities. So, but that is the population. That everybody is not on at the same time, but that would be the general population. I want to note there too, though, that the Dominica is not the only island with the remaining Kalinago people, but that we also have persons in Guyana and Trinidad and St. Vincent. The Dominica sort of leads the way in terms of political organization and structure, in that we still have chief and council, and we deal with a number of international organizations, and we go to international forums and so forth. But as it is, there are also other persons of Kalinago descent on other islands in the Caribbean. A matter of fact, in 1988, we were able to have established what was known as the Caribbean Organization of Indigenous Peoples. And that organization is supposed to have taken on board the unification of all the small groups of our people scattered around, and to address cultural, education, political, and educational issues. But that is something that is still there to be done. It, as everything, organizations usually have issues. And I'm very happy when Damon came across, and now we've set up the Caribbean Amerindian Development Organization, and you good people, good brothers and sisters have joined us in that quest. of uplifting all people as best as possible.
Thank you very much, Irvince. Two very important points you brought up there. One is that the Kalinago Nation in Dominica has the only official like reservation type area in the Caribbean islands, meaning the Greater or Lesser Antilles. It's important to note. Recently, there is a small community of Arawakan peoples on the island of Trinidad. They were given some recognition by the government, but official territory, as I understand it, has not been set up as yet. So we're looking forward to see if that happens. Barbados, none at this time. Who knows how we can lobby for that in the future? But I want to go to Tai. Tai, can you talk a little bit about how COVID-19 has affected Taino people in Borikén and beyond, as far as you know?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the story in Borikén has not been the story that our brother shared about Dominica. One of the first things that we have to think of, because I think the distinction needs to be made, we were the first indigenous peoples to have been dispossessed of our lands. So in the present, our people, our Taino people are all over the islands, meaning, including our island municipalities as well as the diaspora, and not just meaning the United States. But referring particularly to what has happened in our island, and I have to say, due to the colonial status of Borikén, the archipelago of Borikén, the assistance that many assume that just because Puerto Ricans are Americans, they equate their understanding of the U.S. to life in the island, and that could not be further from the truth. The reality is that on all, as Múkaro mentioned, we've had many disasters, one after the other, and COVID has only come to aggravate what was already horrible. We had hurricanes Irma and Maria in 1917. Then we've had the earthquakes that have not stopped. People think that Borikén stopped shaking. No, since last December, the island has been experiencing earthquakes every single day. And I'm talking about not just the ones that we usually get, but numbers that you can shake it and that continue to damage our structures. This impacted education, right? And so as we have seen in the past, it is our elderly and the disabled people that we have from our communities that happen to be in the mountainous area that end up receiving, are the last ones to receive any help, right? We can see, we could, now with COVID, we could see PPEs taking place around the coast and the big district areas like Mayagüez, Bayamón, Ponce. But when it comes to where our people are, that was not reaching. And eventually what happens is that when our people started getting sick, the next thing you knew, Mayagüez and the western side of the island started showing, we started losing a lot of encyclopedias, meaning the elders, meaning all that knowledge that is going with them at disproportionate rates from the rest. Medical attention is not the same. And I also have to say that the mental stress, right, it's just being compounded over the other. We also have Taino respiratory therapists, right? And we could see the load and the number that is doing on our own people. So it's not just what COVID is doing to our elderly, what COVID has been doing to education. Where here in the States, we're used to having access to the internet. But if you happen to be from a remote town or ward in a particular town, even if it's big, you're not going to have that internet connection. You're not going to have the same level of communication that other people right in the city can have, right? So it puts our people at risk. And at the same time, the education that was already very fragile for our kids is taking a toll, right? It's being sacrificed yet again. I have to remind people that because of the earthquakes, many hundreds, if not thousands of children were without school, right? And makeshift schools had to be done. And then when the floods came, well, that was the end of those tarps, right? So it has been struggle after struggle, and we do not have the mechanisms that are necessary to assist the people that are getting sick. The numbers on the island continue to grow tremendously. The government has been putting more restraint on people's activities. Like, for example, since December 7th through January 7th, there's all kinds of restrictions. There's a curfew. On Sundays, nobody can go out. And there's a lot of limitations to what people can do in a time where people, particularly Caribbean people, like to be together with family and having that sense of community. So it is not just, COVID is not just affecting our physical health, but also our mental health and the stability that we need. And like I said, in conditions of a colony, right, being a colony, again, one of the things that are happening is that we have a flight of professionals. So we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough respiratory therapists, because they're being recruited to come here to the US, right? So you have all kinds of factors affecting our peoples, and how do you make ends meet? So it is a combination, and the picture that COVID has presented to our people is not a good one. As far as the positive, I have to say that the importance to our food sovereignty, COVID has allowed for that, for people to realize that we need to really grow our own food. And another one that is, to me, of the essence is that our traditional knowledge holders have been very active in sharing our medicine with people. And I think that that has also allowed us to survive in our own ways, and also exchanging with other indigenous peoples their traditional medicine. So those are the elements that are positive with the situation, and which has empowered our people in some way. But the statistics are very dire, and it's something that I hope that we can change.
Thank you, Tai. Hahom. Damon, can you just maybe tell us a little bit about how COVID has affected the communities in Guyana?
Yes, well, if you were following news, you may have noticed the cases are pretty significant in Guyana right now. Suriname, I believe, it is more severe as well. Barbados has been little to no impact here, really. It's not been significant here at all. We're more or less, as Irvince said, we're back to normal. Our island seem to be doing a pretty decent job of coping with it, luckily. But also you have to wonder about some of the testing too. For example, for many months, Pakuri had 0 cases. Then all of a sudden, some testers, government testers, went in there, and over one weekend, they said that, well, basically 15% of the whole village tested positive, but yet no one had any symptoms, and people were wondering, how could I be sick with this thing and I don't feel sick? So some people then managed to get tests done at other places, and the tests were negative. So then they had to come back in and test again, and subsequently most of those people that seem to have been false positives. So I don't know if it's which country donated those testing equipment or something, but obviously they were faulty, because no one in the community has died from it. And I don't think 15% of a whole village could have been genuinely infected, and yet not a single, nobody's been hospitalized. So either that, or we're super strong triathletes or something, but it didn't make sense to me. But for us here on the Barbados end, and touching back to what you had mentioned before, Kasike, was well, I don't think we will ever pursue any sort of land recognition status here, because number one, we are a re-migrant population that came in 1925. So we could never argue that, oh, well, all, we are directly connected to the population that was here in 1625 or before. So that would be a kind of a useless case to make. But as urban indigenous people, we have been making, I would say, incredible strides as Eagle Clan. There are a lot of things that, as it's been said, and it is not a boast, but it is in fact that of the Arawak clans, the Lokono clans, we are probably the most influential and successful. And that is what has allowed us to then do things and pioneer efforts in Guyana that the others are not able to do. As if all of us are ass broke, there's nothing, all we could do is have a begging bowl out asking for aid. So some of us need to generate our own income and filter it back in to fund our own affairs. As funding is critical, especially in these times that are worse than ever before. Now, you can't truly be a sovereign or an independent people if you are dependent on, aid and donations from outside. Food sovereignty, as Sister Tai was saying, I mean, that is become obviously paramount now, but that also ties into economic self-sufficiency. And as the diaspora members, we are many successful people, entrepreneurial business people, as well as academically and otherwise. You have engineers, doctors, lawyers. We have a professor at the University of West Indies, Jonathan Lashley. He's a cousin. He's one of us. We have another cousin who's a professor at a university in Canada. So, for a population of the 300 diaspora descendants of the ruling class, we have a lot of trained professionals, and that is what many of them then support my efforts back in the tribe, and that's what's allowing me to make progress. No man is an island. Everybody needs a social safety net backing you up with whatever you want to do for your people. It's all well and good to have good intentions, but reality is you need to have the ability to fund those efforts as well. Oh, I forgot to mention I don't know if you can see it here clearly. We created our own sanitizer. Yeah, organic hand sanitizer using the aloe vera barbadensis, which is a native plant. So it is popular and in use, but of course is expensive to make and time consuming. So it couldn't afford to make it to then send it to Guyana to give away to the community for free. So we said the next best thing would be to sell it commercially, online, locally, whatever, locally and internationally, and use the proceeds from that to then fund projects that help with COVID mitigation efforts back on the territory. So we're still using the sales from this product to fundraise, and we'll be seeing many things come on stream from next year based on the success of that product. I think I was on a webinar with the FAO, and we realized that we are the only example up to that point, I don't know about today, but that was just a few weeks ago, of indigenous people that has created, marketed, and commercially has a product that is on the back end of COVID relief efforts. Instead of us being on the victim end of the pandemic, there's an indigenous people. We produce something to help with the solution end of the equation. So I think that was very satisfying for me personally.
Thank you, Damon. I want to get into a little bit of a discussion about our culture. We have a linked ancestral culture. Before the arrival of Columbus, our peoples were interchanging from South America throughout the Lesser and Greater Antilles, from the side of Mesoamerica, meaning Maya peoples coming over, exchanging. And as Tai mentioned in her presentation in the beginning, her comments, our community even touched the southern tip of Florida, and there's possibilities that we were even beyond there. But I want to focus a little bit about culture. I want to take a break from the discussion a minute, and you've done an innovative product here, Damon, the Eagle Clan with the hand sanitizer. But here's another innovation that you guys are working with, one that speaks about telling our story as Indigenous peoples. Ben, if we can just run that the second video that focuses on the Eagle Clan Arawaks in Guyana. Thank you.
Grazie. Avere che da che non cascavo. Amata le dame home. Pizza da bene, te ho corco ad aiavo. Taman ko tamya da. Non cascavo. Amada tanaka ori. Oro tanaka. Nikata ad aiavo ori. Pusa wa jambu. Why can't the Puna University? What is that?
All right, great. Excellent, uh, excellent representation. I see that we are where we're talking about trouble. There you are. Trouble with internet. I know, Irvince, we had a little bit of trouble with you. Glad to see that you're still here. But Damon, I'll let you comment about the film in a little bit, but I want to get some reactions from Irvince first, and then I'll go to Tai. Again, what I was stressing in the beginning is that although we have, some various ancestral heritage, our link is this culture, this what is identified as Arawakan culture. Through that, Irvince mentioned that also the Karina culture is also part of Kalinago, but there is a connection with us through the Arawakan culture. Irvince, as a community leader, as somebody who's also involved in culture, when you see a film or a presentation like the one that was just shown done by Damon, how does that make you feel? And do you see the commonalities amongst our cultures in a film like that, and maybe some differences? Maybe you could share a little bit, and then I'll go with the same question to Tai.
Okay, as you said, Robert, we've been having issues with the net, and there are times it came on and went off a few times. But I'm going to use my imagination to link up a few things here. And I am sure that a lot of the dances and the chanting, it has a lot of similarities between us. And I know for a fact, because of the connections we've had over the years, that we share a lot. It's pretty much the same. The food, the way that we prepare food, the way that we build the drums, the materials we use for making the drums, for the craft and all that. There are a lot of connections there. There's that feeling. One of the things that I have noted even more so when we meet as indigenous people is that we connect. And I'm talking about instant connection. I don't know, I may not know I may not know, I did not know you. I want to meet, for example. It is like, hey, we've been hanging out for the last 50 years, hey, come over here. We enter in each other's private space, you know. We're into the bedroom, we're eating, we're sharing, it's just the connection is so powerful, you know. So I want to say, based on that, that a lot of the other things that we'll see happening in the films, we look at one indigenous film to the other, we can see that connection in there. I also, in mentioning that, if I can do a little sidestep, I have had the opportunity to be connected and did some work with the University of Leiden in Holland, and the research too that they have been doing proves that there have been connection and trading and business happening between our people long before the white people got here, you know. And you look at the type of shells and craft remains that have been found, the way that the burials took place, and it can show that we knew each other long before. We had an empire set up among ourselves. And I always make the comment that today, in areas of the Caribbean where you find the leaders, the people who came after us, now trying to bring together some unification among themselves and working together, governments trying to operate as a federation, or you know, those things were things that our people did before. You know, we had those systems in place, and it's unfortunate that a lot of the people who came after us feel that we were primitive. But then just saying a word again, linking something to COVID. Uh, COVID have made people stay at home, but and persons get frustrated, and persons who come from different societies than us, they're going crazy because they can't step out. You know, their life is different. For native people, for indigenous peoples, in many cases, we just out there planting the food, taking care of the yucca, you know, making sure the cassava is ready in time, doing our own thing, going down by the riverside, catching a fresh bath, getting some fish, doing some cooking, taking care of our domestic animals, you know, and it's our life. And this is the life that they said was primitive, you know. All our herbal medicines, you know, we don't have to worry about going to get all this fancy tea bags and so on. We got all the herbs growing in the backyard. If that was primitive, then we really had a good culture that persons envy today. So yeah, they are connections.
Thank you, Irvince. Tai, I want to go to you. You know, seeing that film, listening to what Irvince is saying, you know, what are some of the similarities, connections, and possibly differences that you see amongst, you know, the Kalinago, the Lokono, and the Taino peoples? Unmute yourself. Yeah.
I will go. I'll make a statement that is pretty blanketed, but it's my belief. I always say that when it comes to indigenous peoples, I really think the teaching was one, and then it spread all over, because we can always connect when it comes to spirituality. Some of the way of our cosmovision, right? And for example, in this particular film, the listening to the elders automatically takes us back to our own childhood. That's how I saw it immediately, and the passing of this information, which I think it's crucial, something that we need to do through today, right? To promote that intergenerational dialogue, and I think that it was obviously presented there, and it is up to us to pass that forward. When it comes to differences, I think that the differences have been created by the invaders, right? The Eurocentric mentality, because the exchanges, as you were saying, Múkaro, have been taking place all along. The stories have been taking place all along, and one of the things that I experienced myself was I was giving a presentation in North Carolina, and I have this friend that I always thought she's Afro-Indigenous, right? And she had heard me talk about Taino, but this day she says, but I'm Arawak, right? Not understanding that a lot of people in Jamaica or indigenous peoples would be referred to as the Arawaks, as if they were separate from the Taino, what we understand as the Taino culture of today, right? And it took a little bit of conversation there to see and connect. We are like really the same peoples. We may just be separated by water, as my daughter said once, right? But we still are the same people. And I think that when you're looking at the indigenous heart, at the indigenous aniki, right? Heart, mind, and spirit, in our case, and I'm stressing on what Irvin said, that bond is recognizable. The second one, we're with one another, it's almost a sense of family that you don't have words to explain that, but it's there.
Thank you, Tai. I think it's you raised a lot of important points. That idea of the colonizer and the way the now dominant cultures portray us. Irvin's talked about this, about the way they cast us as primitive. You talked about this, about telling different stories. I think I mentioned a little earlier that like the term Arawak. Other tribes called Lokono and others Arawak. That name sticks, like the word Sioux stuck amongst the Lakota, Nakota, and Dakota peoples, right? And so they've taken that, and then those scholars amplify that, so people think Arawak is a tribe. It's really not a tribe. It's again a cultural and linguistic grouping that was really titled by academics. But we are related, though, even beyond that grouping. We know we're related, and even our languages, as we could see, are related, much like when we say the Latin language, right? What is Latin, and how it's the precursor to Spanish, Portuguese, French, right? And Italian, right? They all come from Latin. So in that same way, we're also linked through that ancestral language and those cultures. There was a comment that came up also in the chat that I just wanted to highlight before we go to Damon. But they were asking about the word Taino, and I want to be very clear. People are trying to say that that's not what our people called ourselves, or that's not what we use. People are thinking about this term in the wrong way. Taino was used as a term of self-identification. It was recorded twice in the early colonization period, where the indigenous peoples themselves used that term. Academics then took that term and used it to apply in the same way that Arawak is applied to a larger grouping of peoples. However, those peoples, right, that are within that are still related. And in the Taino culture, Taino as a way of being, right, as a way of right action, being good people, right, is a linkage for that. I know Kalinago has a similar term, Lokono, like being the people in that. All of those terms that we call ourselves are there. But our peoples just didn't have one term, right? There was many peoples maybe on one side of the island. We identified ourselves more as one. We maybe identified more of ourselves as another. It's the same group throughout all. Damon mentioned that the idea of clans, referring to ourselves as clan. A lot of the clan systems were lost over years. So with that, I want to go to Damon and just can you touch a little bit on the Lokono language, Damon? Is it in danger in Guyana? Is it spoken beyond Guyana? Maybe just touch a little bit about that, and then we can go to Irvince and Tai, and just to touch a little bit about the language.
Yes, what the Toloko at Gianiwa, what known as the Arawak language, there's still a few speakers in Venezuela, maybe over 1,000 speakers in Guyana, Suriname, several hundred speakers still, and Cayenne, French Guyana, perhaps 100 or more. So, I mean, it's not on the verge of extinction, but the fact that the people who are fluent in it are all over the age of 50 years old is in itself a worrying sign that the younger ones are not mastering the language and speaking it. You'll find more young people who may understand it partially, but are not able to speak it fluently. But most of those, they only speak the English language fluently, or they may only speak Dutch or Taki-Taki or French or Spanish. But they'll understand a lot of. Everybody knows tons of words and phrases, but to have a conversation with you, very few young Lokono are able to have a fluent conversation with an elder who is fluent in it. Let me put it that way. Like my wife's parents are good examples of that. They were both fluent and they spoke to each other in the language every day, but neither of them taught any of their 10 children to speak it. Why? Because when they were in the colonial system schooling in British Guyana in those days, their teachers would literally beat them when they were students themselves in school and tell them, stop talking that nonsense, only speak English. So they grew up with that 1950s era mentality that we're doing our kids a disservice by encouraging them to speak our language. Maybe the sun has set on our culture, and we're people that are on a path to extinction. Who knows what subconsciously was in their minds, but they did not see it as a priority as a generation today maybe seeing it, as I would like my children to learn. I'm still learning myself. I would, encourage my family to learn, but it wasn't such an impetus in their days in the 50s and 60s in Guyana. So you have a whole generation that grew up not knowing it, and that's her mom and dad talking, and they can understand enough to know what they're saying, but never bother to learn how to communicate with them in their own language. So that was the sad aspect of it. I think Suriname is not as bad as Guyana when it comes to that, but there are far less of us in Suriname, maybe a quarter of what the Guyana population is. So it really needs to be taught in schools again in Guyana for it to be safe, because that is like the largest number of Lokono left on earth are in that one country. So if the language dies there, then it will really and truly be on a path to extinction.
Thank you, Damon. Irvince, what is the state of language reclamation or language on the island of Dominica?
I believe that we are doing a lot of progress now. And I'm saying that against the background that when I served, when I was elected chief back in the 80s, language was pretty much absent. Only a couple, and I mean two persons, elders, who would speak a few phrases of our language. We began then by doing some research, which we were able to come up with this dictionary of 1674, which was written by a French priest. As the chief, I was able to get linguistics to do the translations, because it was French Kalinagu. And then they did it to put in the English, so we had it to be Kalinagu, French, and then English. A few copies were made, and then we tried reviving it at that point. But a few years later, especially now, we have quite a few young group of people who are interested in the language. And there have been some movements. One of the persons who have done a lot of research, and I know she's listening now, so greetings to you, Kisha. Kisha Joseph, who comes out of St. Lucia, lives in New York. She studied at the Arizona Linguistic University there. And she did a lot of work with us and for us. And she came to Dominica, and that arose younger people to develop interest. So to make the long story short about the language, today, every morning on our national radio station, we have two cultural individuals, who give the Kalinago word for today. That's the progress we have made. So every morning, just before 7 o'clock in the morning, the national radio station comes up with the Kalinago word for today. It is explained, it is spelled out properly, and that is creating a lot of interest nationally and for ourselves. So the way forward would be to bring up language groups. We've been thinking of that. We will take, which will take more interest in developing the language. So as far as our language is concerned, from what I could say zero, we are really making some steps forward with it.
Thank you, Irvince. Tai, do you want to share a little bit about Taino language and some of the efforts that we have going?
Absolutely. A lot of people say that if you don't have language, you lose the culture. Even though I think language is really important, the resilience of our peoples have demonstrated that it takes a lot more to destroy a peoples, right? In our case, the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean. after all the things that have taken place, are still here. Yet in our case, the Taino language was the lingua franca of the Caribbean. And it also had elements from other lingua francas, such as the old Tupi Guarani, etc. In the present, we have an advantage that we did not have in the past. In the past, it was the Eurocentric or the criollito, utilizing our words and determining what they meant and how they were to be used or how they were to be written. And although Taino has been the indigenous language to have impacted or enhanced Spanish the most, obviously with the most words, one of the things that I see as really positive is that in the present, we've had many Taino peoples digging and researching and devoting a lot of time to the revitalization of language. And I want people to know that when we're talking about revitalization of language, this is not just the UCTP or Cato or our brothers in Dominica or our sister, which I see here, Kisha Marie Josephs, Dr. Josephs. She has been, she's officially a linguist, and she has been of the essence in helping our researchers practice and learn and rediscover our language. But I want to make sure that people understand that in the present, there are many, many relatives that are devoting their lives. And here, Kasike Múkaro Borrero is one of those people. And I thank you. And I want to acknowledge the work that you have done. We have to be a little bit careful. And I think it's important that we take a look at what kind of a foundation, right? What basis people have to affirm this is the right word or no, right? And also if people have to use loan words from other relatives to also express what base that is on, right? Because we see a lot of efforts on this. We are not excluded. Revitalization of language is a practice that many indigenous peoples from throughout the world are working on because they had the same experiences. Like Damon said, people would be beaten if they were to speak their native language. And that wasn't that long ago. So we have every right, when it comes to the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, we have every right to revitalize our languages, to do the work ourselves. I'm very happy to say that a lot of us are working on different books, not just on language, but our own stories, as some of the people that are writing on their comments, what can I read? There's a lot of efforts coming regarding language, regarding our history, regarding the fights and the struggles that we're doing in today's world when it comes to defending our rights. And part of those rights are the fact that we have every right to revitalize our languages, and in other places, children have the right to learn their schooling in their original indigenous language. And that's something that people tend to forget because they get all worked up on Spanish or English or French, and not realizing that there are rights that defend indigenous peoples and the right to learn in your own indigenous language.
Hahom Ditu. Thank you, sister, for sharing a little bit about our language there, saying thank you, my sister, Hahom Ditu. And I want to just hold a minute. I have one more video to show. This one is focused, I found this one so we could focus a little bit on the community in Dominica, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about more Tai. You've mentioned it, our rights as indigenous peoples. Damon's mentioned how we work together at the OAS on those same issues. Irvince has also mentioned how we got together as indigenous peoples within the international system. So I want to explore a little bit about the importance of solidarity amongst Caribbean indigenous peoples. But I want to highlight this so we could get a little look at Dominica and the Kalinago right now. So Ben, if you can share that video on the Kalinago, and then we can comment on that a little bit and then go into that last part.
We're here at the Kalinago Barano Ote with our guide Kenrick, who's going to show us a Carib model village.
Okay, welcome. Here I'm Irvince Auguiste. I will be your tour guide. And Kalinago Barano Ote means the Kalinago village by the sea. In the Kalinago territory, we are comprised of 8 villages, and we have a population of about 3,500 people living in the Kalinago territory. All right, and we are spearheaded where we have in our governance, where we have a Kalinago chief, okay, and we have 6 councillors as well. They work very closely in the Kalinago territory.
Well, I was chief then, when Dominica wanted to be independent, but they couldn't have gone into independence without us, since we were, although we are the minority, we were always independent ourselves. But the other Afro-Dominican wanted to be independent, so we say that is going in solidarity with them. That is when we, as the indigenous peoples of Dominica, became a statutory body of our own. And then we had to sign some documents with the British. We got into independence in 1978.
At the Kalinago Model Village, it is a place where we try to promote and preserve various aspects of our lost cultural heritage. Okay, so it's not a living museum where you actually find people living in this area, but it's more working and showcasing and getting an opportunity actually to create some economical activity. We are the last remnants remaining Kalinago people right here. That is why we have a structure like this Kalinago Barana Uti right here. Okay, in the littoral woodland, we have this tree right here. Okay, all this line up right here, that's almond, the almond plant. And in my hand, I have this fruit, okay, and they are dried, okay? And I'm going to crack this almond for you, so you can actually see the nut. And thus, by using a stone, and I'm going to smash this open right here. Before, traditionally, our ancestors, they would use body painting to show different signs and different purpose that they had in the community. Okay, for tattooing or painting of our bodies, we have this plant right here, okay? It's a small species of fern, okay? And if you observe the leaves, okay, you see it's sort of like pollen right here, right? Nice with all the yellow, like sort of pollen. And then if I just print it on my arm like this, I would have this design. This is a noni tree. Okay, it grows very well in the littoral woodland, especially on this side of the island, on the east, it grows very, very well. Okay, and over the years, it was considered a poison, a bad fruit. But it has become very popular that this fruit has properties which actually help to strengthen your immune system. We make a juice out of the fruit when it's ripe. We call it the noni juice. Leaves are used for making herbal teas and soaps out of the leaves of the noni. Okay, so while we're at our beautiful viewpoint right here, it's very beautiful. That is the Atlantic Ocean. You are exactly looking at the east right here. Today it's very calm. Okay, but it's normally rough. Okay, and that is one of the reasons why the Spaniards, they could not come on this side of the island. Okay, because we are on the roughest part of the island, but yet we are still on the safest part of the island in case of any volcanic activity right here. Okay, I want to just thank you all for visiting us at the Kalinago Baranote. And again, as I said, it's not only that you're visiting the Kalinago Baranote, but the Kalinago territory in a whole.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And you're watching Caribbean Vibrations TV.
All right, great. It's beautiful. I think it was great to take that moment so that people could see the beauty of where we came from. You know, when Columbus landed in the Caribbean islands in 1492, he thought those islands were the closest thing to paradise on earth. And I think people could really get a sense of a little bit about why our peoples thought the way they did. But yeah, so thank you, you know, to all those who put that out. But I want to talk a little bit now about a solidarity amongst our peoples and why, for example, we go to the United Nations, and why is it important for us as Kalinago, Lokono, Taino people to come together? Let's start with Damon this time, and then we'll go to Tai and then to Irvince. So Damon, why don't we you share a few words like that?
Yes, Kasike. Well, yeah, it's something in the Caribbean is considered to be some kind of a new idea, this Caribbean integration and a Caribbean common market. I think it's the 70s they started it on the official political level, but as Chief Irvince was saying, we were conducting, international trade among ourselves from Central America, North America, South America, and the Caribbean for 1,000 years before Europeans even reached here. And that actually was the impetus of the Kalinago Rebellion in 1930, when they had colonial police stopping them from conducting a trade with Marie Galante, a French island. And obviously to the Kalinagos and to all of us, we would say, now, what crap is that? Who are you that came here yesterday telling me that I can't carry on trade with neighboring islands that I've been doing, since time immemorial? So obviously they rejected the imposed authority, trying to stop them doing what they know they had the right to do, and that led to the insurrection there, and some policemen got killed, and some Kalinagos ended up getting killed. The British military got involved, but basically those men were standing up for our rights, which are now enshrined in the UN Declaration. That's why I tend to be a little more on the radical side when it comes to certain things. Every country that I go to in this hemisphere, I work, and I've never applied for a work permit in any of them, because I know to myself, my ancestors were here first, so who is anybody else to tell me that I don't have the right to work in my own hemisphere? So therefore I do it. You just have to do it in a smart way, obviously, but nobody's going to stop me working in my own hemisphere, especially someone from somewhere else. I don't recognize that authority over me. But yeah, it's important that and that was the beauty of the OAS work and the UN work and all of that, because it showed the importance of us reconnecting and reestablishing those solidarity that we had known before, our ancestors had known and practiced since time immemorial. It would actually be allowing colonialism and neo-colonialism to win if we let them, eliminate that drive for us to restore what was, and we come to the very sad status quo, acceptance of how things are now, and oh well, there's nothing we can do. That was then, now is now. No, you have to be the change you want to see in the world, and no man is an island, yes, but there always has to be one or two people who decide to take the lead and make the first steps, and if it is a positive thing, others will follow, and progress will eventually be made. You have to have the long-term vision when it comes to indigenous activities like this. The struggle is 5 centuries old already, and it continues. But this reconnecting on that spiritual level, as Chief Irvince was saying, anytime we are together, we can meet someone for the first time, but as an indigenous person, there's just that natural click that, I feel like if I'm among my own family, and we have a similar cosmovision. We're on the same wavelength when how we see the world and what's going on. So there's a natural spiritual connection existing there already. All we're doing is filling in the spaces in between with, what is intangible connection with a tangible connection, and establishing networks and ties among ourselves. But it's just a formality, really. Spiritually, that's what we have always been doing, and that's what we always will be doing.
Thank you, Chief Damon. Now go to Chief Irvince. The importance of solidarity amongst our people, and why do we go to the UN?
Okay, my take on it is that it is important for unity. Unity is the key for development. Without that unity, and I can speak back to a few years when, as a young man, 14 years old, felt that the Kalinago people could not have survived alone on the island of Dominica. There must have been other Kalinagos or other persons alike. And I went out on the mission. It was successful enough, well, very successful, because we had the regional movements organized. And it is through that solidarity for that strength, that we're able to exchange positive ideas, give strength to each other, to stand up still to what we can call the new colonization. So that this was very important. Not only that we were able to build links and network as a Caribbean community of indigenous peoples, but we were able to go out internationally. Hence the reason the OAS, the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, hopefully on indigenous peoples one day, all the other international organizations, the World Council on Indigenous Peoples and so forth. It was important for that collaboration, for that solidarity, for that unification. I can give the example that Dominica, indigenous peoples back in the 80s, 90s, we were able to have representation, and I was that representative, sitting at what is known as CARICOM. And CARICOM is the organization in the Caribbean that is made up of these governments. I was able to sit in as a cultural representative on the cultural committee of CARICOM because we had formed an organization networking indigenous peoples of the Caribbean. So I was able to get there to present a voice. And that is why it's so important to have that movement, that support each other, because what we may lack academically or probably out of skills in one community will be found in another community. And that is the way that we can help each other. One of the disturbing things for me is when we have academics, indigenous academics, or some persons in our own communities who want to spend time trying to figure out whether we are Arawak, whether you are Taino, whether you are Carib, or whether you are Kalina. It disturbs me because this is a lot of effort that we are making to move together as a people, as indigenous people. And so those persons of indigenous backgrounds don't spend the time trying to figure out what exactly is the terminology or the name of our nations. Get on board and use that talent, use that strength to move us forward for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, so the languages can revive, so that the economic development of our people can flourish too, so that indigenous peoples will move from the stage of having to wait or ask of an NGO or government for funding to have an assembly, to meet, to have a gathering. I think we have that within ourselves. We have a lot of native people, a lot of indigenous, a lot of aboriginal, whatever we want to refer to as a First Nation, to come together and help in that solidarity movement so that we can achieve more for ourselves, our communities, as First Nations, as indigenous.
Chief, thank you so much. I want to go to Tai. Just be mindful. We are right now coming to the official closing of our session. However, thankfully to our JCal technician, Ben, who's really doing a great job throughout all the programs. We've had some tech issues today, and really no fault of his, but sometimes technology is a little shaky. But he will let us go on just a little bit longer so that maybe we can touch upon some of the questions and comments in the chat. Although I think that as we talk, we have been covering a lot of things that people have been asking. And of course, you can always follow up with each one of us, either through United Confederation of Taino People, on Facebook, Instagram, the Eagle Clan Arawaks on Instagram. You can follow up with each one of us individually on these social media networks. Just look for our names on Instagram, on Facebook. You'll be able to find us. We're pretty accessible. I always try to get back to people, the same day, a different month, but the same day. But we can keep going in that way. But I want to get to Tai. talk a little bit about the importance of the international movement for us as Tainos, for people who were once, declared extinct by some of the dominant society. What do you feel about that, Tai?
Thank you. For one thing, I must stress that usually when people take a look at or speak about the indigenous hemisphere, they usually have North America, Central America, and South America, but they seldom include the islands. So we need to start from there, from making sure that we're making a statement as indigenous peoples of the Caribbean, that we are here and that we, as the first peoples to have been impacted by colonization, we're still here and have a voice. Our ancestors, when they had that encounter, measured the others' behaviors on their own, based on their own scale values. And we know what happened, right? And these people were very different from us, very different from our values. So we needed to recognize what our rights as indigenous peoples were. I'm glad to say that here, our relatives that are listening to us have a representation of an effort that was done just not for the OAS, the Organization of American States, but also the United Nations and the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues for the creation and the entire process and advocacy of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Marianne from the listeners was asking about the UN Declaration. I think it's important that you can get it in different languages, the official languages of the UN online. But as far as our advocacy, why is it important? First of all, our voice must be heard. We have been impacted, as our brother was saying, by international frontiers. People do not realize, they usually think, oh, Mexico and the US and Canada and the US, and that pretty much that's that. But as Damon was saying, ancestrally, we were going from island to island and doing our different things. Understanding our rights today, right, and advocating for the respect of our rights is of the essence. It doesn't mean that because we go to the international level to advocate and present the issues that are impacting our lives, that we're not going to do anything at the local level or at the national level. It is one space that it's not ours, right? It still belongs to the states, to the governments, right? But it's a space that has been created for us to express our voices and our concerns. After we do that, and all the things that have been worked on, for example, Múkaro, you with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, those are things that are happening at the international level, but that we must bring down to our own communities. What happens internationally is up to us to reinforce it and to give it the value and to use the instrument at our local levels. The states are not going to do it for us, and that is why it's of the essence that each indigenous person of the Caribbean, in this particular case, become familiar with what our rights are, understand the preamble, understand that what we have endured as indigenous peoples, it's not exclusive, that it's not just us, but the voice of this side of the world has to come from the very islands. And that is why it's important that regardless of where we are as indigenous peoples, as Taino peoples, as Caribbean indigenous people, Kalinago, Lokono, whatever name you use to describe yourself, that you have a clear understanding of what those rights are. And I'm not saying you need to go and advocate shoulder to shoulder, but you can support those of us that are putting our faces and pretty much our lives in the front lines to make sure that our rights be respected.
Ahom, Tai, thank you very much for that. Yes, very important, our visibility, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of us came together from years ago to push our levels, because oftentimes at the local level, we don't always get heard, right? We don't always feel that we are being listened to. And so we have to also take our issues outside so that others can put pressure, right, on the local, right, because they're used to whatever system of oppression they have installed, right? And we have to say it for what it is, because our people have been oppressed from 528 years. We were the first ones contacted, and so the fact that we're still here, that we can share words in our language, that we could sing in our language, that we can pray in our language, that we can connect with each other as relatives, no matter what they told us. I grew up hearing that we were enemies of the Kalinago people, right? When I read the history books. However, when we talked to elders and met each other through, we realized that was not the case. That's what they wanted us to fear. Yeah, of course, every communities have issues, and Damon could talk about that even in Guyana. But always you see a Lakono community there, not too far from a Karina community, right? The peoples are always close together. It's the same thing that happened in the Caribbean islands. And I think that, as we talked about our language, what became the Taino language in the Caribbean really has influences of the whole region, although the main part is that Arawakan linguistic group. We have Tupi-Guarani, as Tai said. We even have real Karina words in our Taino language, meaning the real Carib words from South America have made it up there, again, connected to the Tupi-Guarani, etc. We have also some, influence of Mesoamerican words in Taino. But why I'm saying that is because our region was so connected before the arrival of Europeans. And I say Europeans in quotes because at that time, there was not even a Europe when they got here. It was a sacking and looting of everything in our hemisphere that helped build up what became Europe. But when those folks came over here, we had already intricacies. We were not isolated. And I think that that's what they tried to enforce upon us, that we were isolated. Irvince talked about this very well. We're linking it to what's happening in CARICOM, what the need is now for our communities. So with that being said, I'm very proud to be working with each one of you. We either work together through our work in the United Confederation of Taino People. People could find that online, see the resources. People are asking for books and things like that. We have articles there that are written by our own people, not from others, but from our own. We can connect you to other books as well. You can find each one of us, again, online, if you want to reach out to us individually, or Facebook, again. You have United Confederation Taino People. You also have Caribbean Amerindian Development Organization you could find on Facebook. We have a Taino language group on Facebook. There's a lot of things that we can get to. Tai, I see you want to say something. We'll go around and just maybe see if each one of us wants to add some final points, and then we'll kind of look over, while you're doing that, I'll look over the comments, see if there's any real outstanding questions. But I think we've covered most of the questions, not directly, but in everything that we've said. So why don't we start with Tai, some closing thoughts, maybe what you feel have been left out, what you feel is the best part about our culture, whatever you feel is some closing comments.
First of all, I know that somebody was very interested in learning a little bit more about the language. And to me, even if you only learn one word, repeating that word every single day, using that word is an act of resistance, indigenous resistance in itself. So the name of the UCTP language dedicated forum is Taino Language Forum. Taino Language Forum. This forum is not so much to post or share some article that you found someplace, but it's really dedicated to language. So I think it's really important, and those of you that are listening to us are more than welcome to send a friend request to that page. When it comes to indigenous, and I think that this is the one thing that I want to emphasize, it is my hope that at some points people can declare themselves and state themselves as or identify as indigenous peoples without having to feel that they need to apologize for being who they are. So I want to just leave by sharing what is the most accepted definition of the word indigenous. And to me, is indigenous is saying, I come from peoples that were in a particular place with their own customs and traditions before a colonizer made it there. So because I am, we're not so much as from Borikén. In my case, I always say I am Borikén. So I hope that you can take those seeds of knowledge that you have, what we have shared here, and that you too can proudly state who you are, owning every step of the land you step on.
Ahom Tai. Chief Irvince, you want to, any closing thoughts, anything that you feel that you want to make sure gets out there to our listeners?
Well, first of all, I want to hope that we have been a source of encouragement to our brothers and sisters who've been listening to the program. And for the non-Indigenous persons who have been tuned in, have learned quite a bit more than they knew before, and that they will appreciate the fact that we are here. We've been here a long time, and we are not going anywhere in a hurry. I had the experience once to be referred to as a ghost many years ago when I visited the Smithsonian Institute, because I was walking around with a few distinguished friends, and there was this recording saying that the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean were totally exterminated by disease. And these people looked at me and they said, "Are you a ghost, Chief Auguiste?" So, bad ways, persons learn wrong things in growing, even today in our education system. Exams are being written by our native children, who have to write that the Arawaks ate their way through the the Kalinago people, the Caribs, ate their way through the lesser Antilles, eating all the Arawak men and taking their women for wives. Even today, they still have to write that to get a pass mark. So there's a lot of changes that have to be realized, that must come forward, and hence again the need for saying that we need to have solidarity among ourselves, and that the persons who can bring that change and help us to create the wrong stories, the myths that can be done. But as far as I know, those of us who are talking here, and quite a few many other persons out there, we don't let those things keep us back, because we know the truth, and we are proud to be indigenous. We are proud to be the First Nations, and we join everybody else out there who are listening to us to help us on the way to ensure that we can encourage the younger ones coming out of it. Thank you.
Chief Irvince. Chief Damon, you'll have the kind of wrap up. We are running short of time now. There is another program that'll be happening this evening that has to start to do their tech work and there. So I want to wrap it up. Thank again the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning for putting these building equity programs together, for providing this opportunity for us to raise the visibility of our people and our culture. And we hope that this is not the last one, that we'll get another opportunity maybe down the road, because as people could see, we could talk for much longer than what we're given, all of us here. And we love coming together as family. So that's good. So Damon, any last thoughts, anything that you feel that didn't get out already in the conversation that you feel that the people should hear?
Okay, now just noticing a private Facebook message that was sent after we started. Someone who wants to try to make positive changes in the community from a pro-traditionalist standpoint, but they don't feel that they will get support, and so they're hesitant. I suspect there are many people like that who feel like, I'm just one person, what can I really do to make a change? But No, it literally has always been that one person who makes the first step forward. That, as I said, if it's something positive, others will follow. 28 years ago, I was the first person in my tribe to give my children back indigenous names. Literally everyone thought that, oh, that's stupid sounding names, nobody will follow you and do that. And that's 28 years ago. Now, no month passes without some young couple coming to me asking for me to suggest indigenous names for their kid. Not only in my Lokono people, but among other tribes, Makushis, even a Kalinago young lady last week suggested a name for her baby that's on the way. So, I mean, we know it, but somebody who's now venturing into activism has to understand that you have to think long term. Think of the results you would like to see 50 years down the road, not next year, because you'll get discouraged if you don't see a fast turnover in your efforts. But if you think long term and you keep progressing, never forget that victory comes to those who fight for it the hardest and who fight for it the longest. As long as you remember that quote, don't second guess or doubt yourself. Keep moving forward. You lead, and if it's something positive, others will follow. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but eventually you will have success in whatever positive thing you try to do for your people.
Home Damon, those are great last words. Once again, I want to thank all of my distinguished speakers that we had here sharing this, just all the beauty and the knowledge that they hold as Indigenous people. Chief Irvince Auguiste calling in from Dominica, Takina Tai Pelli calling in from Florida today, and of course, Chief Damon Corrie calling in from Barbados. My name's Múkaro or Roberto Múkaro Borrero, some people say. It's just an honor for me to help just moderate this discussion, add my 2 cents in where I could. But I'm looking forward to connecting with people, and for those who want to make a connection, who feel that write to us, write to the Confederation. It's being Indigenous is not an individual exercise. You have to connect to community, right? That also is the other side of it, So connect with community and talk. Don't think that you're going to become an expert overnight. And one day I talk to you on the internet, next day I see you saying that you're a chief of something. Let's not do that kind of stuff. But let's connect, make real family, and continue on. Again, Irvince, Damon, Tai, I love you all. Danshihibui, as I love you. And Hahom, Ituno, Kena, Atia Ono. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Thank you, Ben, for letting it extend a little bit. Keep a lookout for our last final presentation of the Building Equity Projects final program. It's Building Equity Through Art, Pulling from the Past to Shape Our Future. We have the final finale, the Kwanzaa Celebration, coming up in a little while at 6 p.m. And so I hope that everyone will, tune back in, get something to eat, wash up, and get ready for the beautiful dancing and the sharing of Kwanzaa. When we say happy holidays, we're talking about many holidays happening during this time. So thank you again for tuning in, and we will see you again real soon on behalf of the Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning. One final thing that I wanted to say, very important. All these programs that we featured during this festival were dedicated to our dear departed colleague Kevin Tarrant from the Ho-Chunk and Hopi Nation. He passed. He was a member of our coordinating group. He passed tragically due to COVID. So we're dedicating all these programs to Kevin. He was a stellar leader in the New York City American Indian community. He was a good friend of mine, a brother. We did many presentations and worked on things together. So in his memory, love of his family, we just wanted to put that out there so that people could, think about that and the effects of COVID and why it's important to wear your mask, wash your hands, socially distance, till we get this thing under control. Thank you again. Good night, everyone. Respectful greetings. My name is Roberto Múkaro Borrero, and I'm the facilitator of JCal's Building Equity Project. I trust you enjoyed the previous program, and I invite you to check out all the other exciting programs featured in our Building Equity Through Art, Pulling from the Past to Shape Our Future multicultural event made possible by the New York Community Trust. All the Building Equity programs presented during this festival are dedicated to the memory of our dear departed colleague, Kevin Tarrant. You can learn more about Kevin and the Building Equity project and programs by visiting the JCAL website. While you're there, please consider supporting JCAL's Black History Month programs with a donation. Thank you and happy holidays.